The plan today is to talk about sexism in Mormonism. This one is kind of a hard one. Going back over some of these facts and realizing I buried some of this stuff and pretended like it wasn't a problem because of the amount of indoctrination I got as a kid is a little bit hard for me to stomach. This is The Angry Stage, and I am Jessie. The Mormon Church was organized in 1830, and a woman was not allowed to give a conference prayer until 2013. Women could give prayers in the Relief Society Conference, but Relief Society Conference until recently has always been something very separate from General Conference. For years and years and years, to never have a woman say a prayer is just crazy to me. In 1967, Mormon women were banned from giving prayers in sacrament meeting. And it was not until 1978 that this rule was rescinded and women were then allowed to pray again in these meetings. The whole thought, I think, behind this was that if there's a priesthood holder there, they should be the one giving the prayer because they are the higher authority. And you have to remember, in Mormonism, men are the authority. That's just the way it is. Another measurable way to see how much credence, I guess, women are given in the church is to see how many women are actually giving talks in conference. And thanks to Mist and Sunday School, I have some stats from the last 4 years, 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020. For men in conference for the last 4 years, they spoke 3,247 minutes. 240 men gave talks, and 67 men gave prayers in General Conference. Women spoke for 361 minutes. That's it. Men had 3,247 minutes. Women spoke for 361 minutes in the last 4 years in General Conference. 32 women talked versus the 240 men. And 17 women gave prayers versus the 67 men who gave prayers. This is a big difference in numbers here. And a good number of women are in the church. To be in the church and not see yourself represented, not have women speaking for you who are like you is problematic, because I think there should be way more diversity in a church that is supposed to be run by God. I don't know. It's just one of the problems that I see. In the early 2000s, there were a few women in my ward who wanted to get their endowments. It took a long time for them to be able to get permission because neither of their husbands were active believing members or had even been baptized. And it is crazy to me that a woman's salvation should have to hinge on whether or not her husband is an active believing member. A lot of women in the church did not get endowments until just before they were about to be married or just before they were about to go on a mission. And generally, most young men are kind of indoctrinated heavily into going on a mission. So they get their endowments at 18 and 19. Women, for a very long time, did not get them until it was about time for them to get married. Because of that, there were lots of women who were excluded from their families' ceilings because they didn't have their endowments because they themselves hadn't gone on a mission or were not married. I don't think that's fair. It is not fair to hold somebody back from their endowment and from those blessings of the temple purely because they weren't married and did not go on a mission. There are a lot of issues in the temple, and it wasn't until recently that they made some major changes to the temple ceremony that made it less sexist. One of the major changes was that women don't have to veil their faces anymore. As a woman, when I went through the temple at 18 for the first time, yes, I got married at 18, I was a baby, I had to veil my face in part of the ceremony. Men do not have to veil their faces, ever. Women, until recently, were told that they had to obey or hearken unto their husband as their husbands hearken unto God. Men are told to hearken unto God, women are told to hearken unto their husbands. Women do not have a direct relationship with God in the temple, and this was not changed until just recently. Before you go in for your endowment for the first time, you are given a new name. Women are supposed to tell their husbands their new name. Men cannot tell their wives their new name. There was an interview with somebody who worked in the temple on their mission, where they talk about how even in the temple, when they would tell everybody what the name was on rotation that day, because in Mormon temples, they have names that they rotate through every month. So all the women who go through on June 26th get the same name. All the men who go through on June 27th get the same name. They would have these meetings in the temple with all of the temple patrons who were working that day. They would tell all of the women what the new names were going to be for that day so that they would know, so they could be able to help the people going through the temple that day. And then they would make the women leave the room so that they could tell the men the name for that day. So even the temple workers were not allowed to hear the men's name. The family proclamation was a proclamation put out by the church talking about gender roles and what they expected of men and women in the church. And I feel like in some ways this was a way to combat worldliness. This was the church putting their foot down and saying, we have specific gender roles. Men are men, women are women, gender is important. By divine design, fathers are to preside over their families in love and righteousness, and are responsible to provide the necessities of life. So men, if you want to be a stay-at-home dad, that's not something you can do in Mormonism. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to go work. Mothers are primarily responsible for the nurture of their children. In these sacred responsibilities, fathers and mothers are obligated to help one another as equal partners. Disability, death, or other circumstances may necessitate individual adaptation. So if your spouse dies, then yes, you, as a woman, you have to go to work. As a young girl in church, it was drilled into me over and over and over again that my responsibility as a woman was to be a wife and a mother, and that those were the greatest callings I could have. I even have a letter. I think I posted a TikTok video about it, but I have a letter from my father where he details this out, that my role is to be a wife and a mother, and that is the greatest thing that I can do. And this is not something just that my dad picked up willy-nilly. This is stuff that was drilled into church members. No women signed the family a proclamation to the world. It's all signed by men. Just pointing that out. In church leadership, the majority of the positions that are held, the majority of the positions of power that are held by men. There is a small amount of women who are in church leadership, and they are the ones who do not get paid. Men who are in the Quorum of the 12 all get paid. I believe that even the Quorum of the 70 gets a stipend of some kind. The women who work in the Relief Society, General Relief Society presidency, do not get paid anything. This one is moving on to working out of the home. So this is a question that was answered by Barbara B. Smith. She was the general president of the Relief Society in July of 1976. What are you doing? My husband walked in. Don't steal my beef jerky. I'm gonna finish this. Bye-bye. Don't eat any more of my stuff. See you later. Okay. He's always stealing my food. If my wife works, we can send our son on a mission. Should she work? Okay, so here's what she says. By all means, you should work. She should work. Each member of the family should work to send a worthy son into the mission field. But work is one thing, employment another. Please do not encourage your wife to accept employment outside of your home. So she's saying, hey, don't get employed out of the home. Even if it's going to help send your child on a mission, your wife needs to stay in the home. Men in the church are told, you get to be a provider, you get to be a priesthood holder, you get to be a husband, and you get to be a father. And women are told, you get to be a wife and a mother. Women should be able to do both of those things and add in employment if they want. That's just the case. And some men feel like they want to be the stay-at-home dad, and that family dynamic should not be frowned upon. If both parents want to work, that should not be frowned upon. And I think one of the biggest things that women see in the church is that their young boys get the priesthood, their brothers get the priesthood, their fathers get the priesthood, and they themselves want to take part in that. If my family had stayed active in the church, when my son hit the age of 12, I guess now 11, he would have had more power and authority in the church than I would have as a grown woman who's lived it my entire life. Women are still excluded from places of leadership. A woman could not be a bishopric leader because she does not have the priesthood. Women cannot pass the sacrament because they don't have the priesthood. Women cannot give blessings of healing because they don't have the priesthood. Women cannot baptize their children because they don't have the priesthood. I guess maybe they can sit there and, I don't know, witness something. But for years, even witnessing was out of our reach because we were women without priesthood. If the church is true, why were there needs for these major changes? Why could the temple ceremony, to begin with, not have been sexist? Why was it for a time that the prophet, who is said to never be able to lead the church astray, why is it for a time he said no women could pray in sacrament meeting? For over a decade. Why is it that women were not allowed to even pray in conferences? If the church is true, women should have been treated equally from the beginning. Women, I want to hear from you. If you're an active, believing Mormon, how do you feel about women getting the priesthood? Is that something that you want? And for women who've left the church, was that something that was on your radar? Was that something that bothered you, that you didn't have the ability to be equal in the church? So I want to give a big thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope that you guys are getting something out of this, whether or not you are a patron or not. I hope that this is helpful to others who are maybe deconstructing Mormonism and trying to work through this stuff. It's really nice to know that you are not alone and that there are others who feel the way you do. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it there, guys. Let me know how you feel about the video in the comments down below. I'm really curious, and I do read all of your comments. So I will see you all in the next one. Bye.